What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym. Chapter 12. It's not the first time Harry's been stabbed, of course. There was that case in Brixton the year before last, an escaped Death Eater holed up in a Muggle apartment not unlike Harry's own. Harry went in without backup, and the bastard stuck him through the shoulder with a fire poker, which was a bitch to fight through and even worse to heal. There was that time in the alley with the invisibility cloak and the occlumens too, and another with a toasting fork when he was a junior aura during what should have been a routine domestic dispute call. He's no stranger to it, the rush of shock and adrenaline, the way the pain starts sharp and breathtaking and then seems to settle out over his whole body. It's not the sort of thing you forget, no matter how long it's been since your last go-round. It is the first time he's ever been stabbed, when he wasn't at least vaguely expecting it, though. It's the first time his constant vigilance has let him down. Harry reaches for his wand, but it's not in his pocket, and he swears. He's not frightened, even though he knows he should be. This is their M.O., these thieves who have been making Draco miserable all these months, who attacked Hermione in the streets. They've come for him, and they're better than he is. They've gotten away from him twice and left him with a string of crimes he couldn't solve. He's wounded and wandless, and he should be terrified. Mostly, he's just angry. Mostly, he's just thinking that these bastards hurt Hermione, hurt Draco, and even if it kills him, he's going to make them pay. He turns, only stumbling a little, and, "Professor Slughorn?" Harry says. He blinks because that can't be right. Because after all these weeks of searching and puzzling and taking the pieces apart and putting them back together again, the answer cannot be, it just cannot be, Horace fucking Slughorn. He doesn't fit the profile. He doesn't so much as share a body type with any of the glamoured professionals Harry's encountered over the course of this case. And anyway, he's too old to have been one of them. Even if he had managed to hold a shape-changing full-body glamour one or both of those times. God, Harry took a meeting with him in the very beginning. He's an official departmental consult. They went over the notes of the case and he was, well, obsequious like he always is, but not a fucking criminal mastermind. It can't be Slughorn, because it doesn't make any sense for it to be Slughorn, because Harry would have figured that out by now. On the other hand, there is the very damning evidence of the knife he just stuck in Harry's back, so... "Harry, my boy," Slughorn says, his voice warm and congenial, like Harry standing in front of him in a queue instead of dripping blood on Draco's tiled floor. "Please, it's Horace. I think it's fuck you, actually," Harry says. He reaches around him and tries to assess how badly he's hurt. The knife is still in the wound, and when he jostles it by accident, pain screams through his entire body. He takes a slightly shuddering breath and pulls his hand away, finds his fingers come back wet with blood. How did you even get in here?" "Oh, Harry," Slughorn says with a little laugh. "You remember my talent for housebreaking, don't you? Learned out of necessity, of course. Perfectly vulgar to do it for sport, but I did get rather good at it in those years I was on the run. I started out with just Muggle places, but a man does miss his creature comforts. By the time you and Albus find me, I was in visiting homes about half the time. The trick, you see, is to come in when the wards are allowing guests, and then simply hide yourself until your timing is right. I came in with the last round of the museum guests on Friday, and then spent an instructive weekend as a neglected CT in the second-floor sitting room." He leers at Harry a little, voice threaded through with mocking pity. "I saw your little display with Mr. Malfoy, you know. So sweet, so touching, so sad the way it's all going to end in such tragedy." "Is this supposed to be scaring me?" Harry demands. He tries to make it sound unruffled, like he's just having a normal chat with a normal criminal, even though halfway through he has to brace himself on the counter just to say upright, "Because, to be totally honest, it's mostly just pissing me off. You'd have been better off killing me up front." "Who's trying to kill you?" Slughorn says. He twirls Harry's wand between his fingers, a gesture that registers distantly for Harry as a familiar, important. He's having a little trouble keeping his thoughts in order.
I mean, if you die, then you die, of course. It would be very sorry to lose you, Harry. You always did have such an enormous amount of promise. It's a shame, really, that it came along with so little self-control.
Oh, bite me, Harry snaps. Slughorn smiles.
I think I've already done all I'll need to do to you, Harry. You see, I don't want you to die, although, again, I doubt I'll lose much sleep if you do. You, my boy, are simply the perfect bait. I don't need you to die, I need you to bleed, so that Mr. Malfoy will come running him.
And here Slughorn shrugs, a little smile playing at the edge of his mouth.
Well, him, I'll admit, I intend to kill.
Harry doesn't think, he just acts, throwing himself at Slughorn with a cry of rage, one fist in the air. He might be wondless and injured, but that doesn't make him helpless, and Slughorn is old anyway. Harry doesn't need magic to take him. Harry doesn't need magic to beat him until he's too bruised and battered to so much as look at Draco the wrong way, let alone murder him in his own house. Except, as it turns out, he does. Except Slughorn waves his wand and says,
"Protego,"
almost lazily, and Harry's closed fist hits the solid wall of the shield charm instead of his hideously, unbearably smug face. The impact causes such an intense burst of pain from the wound on Harry's back that he cries out, that he almost blacks out. He falls to his knees, pulling in hissing breath through gritted teeth, and holds on to consciousness with everything in him while he waits for the worst of it to pass.
"It's like I said,"
Harry hears Slughorn say, as if from a great distance.
"You're just not very good at this, my boy. I blame Albus, I really do. I'm sure that needing a war weapon is all well and good, but he might have made sure you learned some critical thinking skills just in case you didn't manage to survive."
He sighs, a fond, wistful sort of sound.
"Ah, Albus. Now there was a man who knew how to keep the grease on the wheel, if you know what I'm saying. But wait, who am I talking to? Oh, of course you don't. Your type took over after the war, didn't you? You and Ron Weasley and Kingsley Shacklebolt and Rebecca Earhart and that Hermione Granger, who might be the worst of the lot. Idiot children, all of you. You accept the people that do the right thing just for the sake of it. You think you can really run a government with clean hands."
His voice and eyes go hard.
"No more little favors. No more inside connections. And you really think people are just going to play along?"
"It's been working out for us pretty well so far," Harry says, looking up at him through his hair and boiling over, seething with rage. "Is this what it is about, then? You want to exact revenge on what? On Draco Malfoy because nobody's bringing you crystal pineapples or whatever anymore? That's insane. That doesn't even make sense."
"Of course it doesn't, Harry,"
Slughorn says, tone genuinely pitying this time.
"Because it's not what I'm doing. This thing between Mr. Malfoy and I is about the houses, pure and simple. I was only saying."
"The houses?" Harry's starting to feel more than a little woozy, and Slughorn must be able to see it. He laughs and shakes his head.
"Look at me, standing here chatting as if I don't have things to do,"
Slughorn says. He pockets Harry's wand, and something about the way he does it, the continuation of the little twirling motion from before. "You were," Harry says slowly, "you were the woman in that first break-in, and at the second you were that guy." He stops, trying to think through the static crowding his mind, the ringing in his ears. "You used Polyjuice and Glamorous, didn't you?"
"Why would you?" "To throw you off track, obviously,"
Slughorn says and sighs.
"It's just not the right job for you, I'm afraid. Don't you worry, if you do survive this, I'll obliviate the whole experience away, and we'll start you over as something else. You'll be so grateful, of course, to have been saved from a brutal attempt at murder-suicide at the hands of a former Death Eater, that you'll do whatever I say. A professional Quidditch player, perhaps. That would keep you in the papers, you know, and in plenty of favours, and I'm sure Gwennock would be happy to show you some tricks." "You and Gwennock Jones can both go to hell," Harry says, fear striking him for the first time at the thought of Slughorn trying to keep him like a trained animal. It's not that Harry's worried he'll actually fall victim to it. Harry could throw off an Imperius at 14, but the idea that he could wake up in St. Mungo's with Draco dead, with no memory of Draco, thinking that Draco tried to kill him. Maybe I will let you die.
Slughorn snaps. Harry tries to keep the relief out of his face, his voice, which keeps mild, as he says, "Guess I'll see you in hell, then." Slughorn scowls at him, and Harry grins back, slow and vicious. "You better hope I do die, Horace, because if I live and you've killed him, I swear to God I'll send you there myself." Slughorn goes, and Harry's not sure how long he sits there on the floor. He knows he tries to stand and doesn't quite make it, pulls himself part of the way up, and then slumps back down against the cabinet. He knows he looks down at a little puddle of his own blood, and he laughs, even though it hurts, because honestly, it's a bit funny. It's a bit funny that after all those near-death experiences, fighting the most powerful dark wizard in 100 years, after he actually did die, however impermanently, at that maniac's hands, he's going to bleed out here on the floor of Grimmauld Place, murdered with his favorite knife. He tries to stay awake because Creature's not here, and Creature would be here if he wasn't going to go get Draco, and Slughorn thinks Draco will come. Harry's not so sure. Harry hopes, actually, that Draco doesn't care about him at all, that Draco leaves him here to die, because that would mean he'd stay away. It would hurt, but not for very long, and Draco would live, so that would be fine. Harry keeps closing his eyes and then opening them again, and it feels like blinking, but Harry's pretty sure that it's not. He's pretty sure that every time his heavy eyelids fall, he's falling too, away from consciousness he's trying to cling to. He's having some trouble remembering the problem with that. It would be such a relief, wouldn't it, to just go to sleep, deal with all this fuss in the morning.
"Harry, you absolute fuck! Don't you dare be dead! I swear to God, if you're dead, I'll...
Draco. Harry's eyes open. Draco's kneeling in front of him, his eyes wide and looking everywhere, but at Harry's face. His own is deathly pale. His hands are moving too quickly for Harry to really understand, reaching for him and pulling away and doing it all over again, never quite managing to land a touch. It tugs at a muscle in Harry's chest, the solid truth of Draco's painfully frantic face, and Harry's selfish. He is, because it turns out he's glad Draco didn't leave him here to die. He's probably still going to die, of course, but at least he gets to know this before the end, this fluttering, hesitant tenderness he's never felt before. But it's a trap, Harry says, gasping a little at the pain of drawing the breath to speak. Draco's head whips up and he stares at Harry, face completely immobile, stricken. Harry can't help the small smile that creeps onto his face, and doesn't want to anyway. Maybe Draco doesn't love him, but this might be Harry's last chance to smile at him, and he'll take it, God damn it, before he goes. "You've got to get out of here, Eds." He doesn't get to say the word Slughorn, because Draco kisses him. It's not... Harry knows it can't be a good kiss. He can barely even remember how to kiss right now. And anyway, he thinks Draco might be biting him, a little. It hurts too, even though Draco is carefully not touching him anywhere but at his lips, because it makes Harry's breath come faster, and each breath is a game of Russian roulette, agony-wise. It's not a good use of their time, and it might be what gets Draco killed. And any aura worth their salt would call him stupid just to look at it, and Harry's still so glad of it he could cry.
"Of course it's a trap, you imbecile,"
Draco says, sounding near to tears, when he pulls back. He rests his forehead against Harry's for a second, bracing his hand on the cabinet next to them.
"Do you think I don't know a trap when I see one? What kind of reckless Gryffindor idiot do you take me for?"
Harry looks at Draco through his lashes again, trying to drink in every inch of him, trying to affix Draco to his memory like he did with the house.
"You're not wearing shoes." "Fine, maybe I am a reckless idiot,"
Draco admits. He pulls away and gives Harry a helpless once-over, slides both of his hands into his own hair as he does.
"God, I'm useless. My wand was gone the minute I walked through the door. I just looked down and it wasn't there, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Harry. You're covered in blood. You look like, when I came in, you looked like, and all I can think of is is a stupid fucking Caesar joke and that you're not allowed to die.
Hey, Harry says. He fumbles around a little blindly until he gets a grip on part of Draco. The upper arm, he thinks. He doesn't want to put himself through the nightmare of moving to look down and see.
It's okay. Breathe. Oh, Draco says incredulous. Breathe, should I? I should breathe? Is your professional assessment of the situation? You bleeding out on the floor. Think that I should breathe? That's great, Harry. Thank you. That's so helpful.
Oh, you could call me some more names, Harry suggests, his smile going wider. He knows that this is bad, that it's really bad. He knows what really bad feels like, and he doesn't want to die, not with Draco sitting here in front of him, looking like he'll fall apart if Harry does. But, God, but he loves this crazy idiot, who never makes any sense except for when he makes all the sense in the world, and finally, if only for a few minutes, he doesn't have to hide it anymore.
Bastard!
Draco spits at once. His face, it's like he's trying to look angry but not quite managing it, as though somehow he's misplaced part of the mask.
You really are one, you know. I never wanted, you can't imagine, to feel this way about someone else. It's too much risk. I knew it would be, I knew it. And now you're going to die, and I'm going to have to live with that. You rat fuck. It's everything. Even a simple act of eating is tainted, because now every time I look at food, I think about you. Food, Harry. That which we need to survive. It's not right.
Maybe you can enchant the storeroom to make it all look like something else, Harry says, drifting a little. He's having a very hard time keeping his eyes open. Like leaves or something. Tree ones. Never cooked you anything with tree leaves in it. There's a long silence, and then Draco breathes.
The storeroom. Oh my God.
Harry doesn't totally track on what happens next. Draco calls creature, and then he kind of blacks out for a second, and then he's floating, he thinks, laying stomach down on one of his bed sheets, being carried through the air. It must be creature's doing, because Draco's next to him. Draco doesn't have a wand. Harry can see his sucked feet proceeding along the floors of the kitchen and then the mudroom. You have to, Harry says, remembering in a sick rush, turning his head to look up at Draco, even though he can't hold back a groan of pain at the motion. You have to go. It's still a trap. He'll kill you.
Oh, shut up and focus on keeping yourself alive for once in your bloody life.
Draco snaps, and the ground under his feet changes again to the polished wood grain of the stairs down to the storeroom. Harry feels the oddest sensation wash over him. He's felt leaky, he supposes, is the best word for it, for this last however long, as though not just his blood, but his thoughts too, the things that made him him, were pouring out through the wound in his back. But now, there's this tingling along in his veins, centered around the knife, and he doesn't feel healed or even any better, just like the slippage has stopped somehow. The stasis charms, Harry realizes. Creature said it himself, that masters and mistresses used to sleep down here to keep themselves fresh. They can't heal him or replace the blood he's lost, but they'll buy him some time, keep him hovering here, weak but alive, for at least a little longer. Draco, you're a genius.
Stop talking, Draco says. It was a shaky breath, and adds fiercely, Do you think I want praise from you while you're half dead and barely coherent? No, Potter, I do not. I, unlike some people I could name, do not have an ego so unsightly and massive that it needs constant stoking in even the most dire of circumstances.
His facade shatters a second later, when Creature gently lowers Harry's makeshift sheet stretcher to the ground, and, despite himself, Harry makes a little noise at the impact.
Harry, is it not working anymore? Did it stop?
It's working, Harry says. He can feel it working, and it's easier to stay awake now, even if he still feels as though he's taking about 7 bludgers to the face and body and would like more than anything to pass out and wake up in a hospital wing. The effect of the charm doesn't extend far enough to give him the strength to hold his own weight, however, and after a second of trying to push himself up on his arms, Draco says,
Oh, for God's sake, sometimes you drive me so insane,
and reaches over to help him up. Once Harry's upright, Draco doesn't pull his hand away. He just kneels there on the floor, one hand on the ball of Harry's right shoulder and the other curled around his left biceps, and fixes him with an accusing look.
"You were supposed to keep me from getting murdered, you know,"
Draco says severely. Harry's not sure if it really fits, tone-wise, with the way one of Draco's thumbs is rubbing a steady, soothing pattern against his arm. He's not even sure if Draco knows that he's doing it.
"Not get murdered yourself. You're always stealing my bits, Potter. It's honestly pathetic. I mean, even at school."
"Slughorn," Harry remembers abruptly, fury washing over him again.
"McGonagall," Draco returns, raising his eyebrows. "Flitwick, what are we doing?"
"No, I mean, it's Slughorn," Harry says. "Who did this? Who did all of this?"
"What?"
says Draco, looking as dumbfounded as Harry was.
"Horace Slughorn, the potions professor? Potter, surely not. I know you've lost a lot of blood, but I swear that man once let Blaze trade him half a box of candied orange peels to forget he caught us drinking in the Slytherin common room. He can't be a criminal mastermind."
Harry laughs a little, regretting it even as the sound comes out of his mouth. "Yeah, came as a shock to me too."
"Well, I have to say I'm not impressed with his trap-laying skills," Draco says, looking around. "We could survive for years down here. Well, I could."
He frowns at Harry, head tilting to get a better look at the knife still sticking out of his back.
"Merlin, that's horrible. We have to go get you to St. Mungo's. Creature, can you?" "No," says a now familiar voice. "He can't."
And Horace Slughorn steps through the door to the storeroom.
"Dear God,"
Draco says. He's turned to blink at him, but one of his hands is still on Harry's shoulder.
"That's really Slughorn."
"I told you," says Harry.
"Yes, well, I thought the odds were heavily in my favour that you were raving mad,"
Draco snaps, glaring at him, before he looks back at Slughorn and lets out a heavy sigh.
"It's really not good for the Slytherin reputation, you know, putting stuff like this. You tarnish the name of the group."
Harry rolls his eyes at Draco's back, amused and faintly horrified that that's what Draco has chosen to object to right now.
Slughorn does not look entertained. "And what would you know about maintaining Slytherin's reputation, Mr. Malfoy? As I recall, during the war, I stepped up for the winning side, and you—" "Yes, made a lot of horrible mistakes for which I was tried before a jury of my peers," Draco snaps. "Is that how you excuse what you're doing? Brutalizing this house, attacking innocent women in the street?" "That wasn't me, in fact," Slughorn says. "It was on my order, of course, but I didn't attend to it personally."
"You must sleep great at night," Harry mutters, and Slughorn smiles.
"You know I do, my boy," he says. "I truly do. But I would sleep better, much better, in fact, in one of the beds here than I would in any at my home." "Wow," Draco snaps. "Thanks for that very important bulletin about your napping preferences, but do you know, I find myself oddly uninterested. Creature, I'm sorry, I got distracted by the madman. Can you please aberrate Harry to St. Mungo's, and then have him send all the Aurors he can think of right back here? That would be just excellent."
"I'm not leaving you here," Harry snarls, and at the same time Creature whispers, "Creature, sorry, Master Draco. Creature would if he could, but he cannot." Draco blinks at Creature, obviously startled.
"Why the hell not?" "For the same reason he couldn't do anything when I had you at my mercy, Mr. Malfoy," Slughorn says. "One of the masters of the house is in mortal peril. He can only call another master or another house." "But," Draco says, turning to stare at Creature, "I'm perfectly fine, I'm—" He trails off and his gaze flicks to Harry, aghast. "You don't mean—"
"Creature, sorry, Master Draco," Creature says again. Distantly, through the wave of realization threatening to engulf him, Harry thinks there's something a little odd about that. Normally when Creature apologizes, it's accompanied by wailing and suggestions of what kind of harm he deserves, not the wide-eyed, entreating gaze he seems to be directing at both of them now. "The house knows how Master Draco's feeling, and Harry Potter was its master once before. Harry Potter stays here. Harry Potter has walked the house, attic to foundations, while Master Draco slept. The house has shown the way for him. It has let him enter the storeroom by himself. Master Draco is still master of Grimmauld Place, but Harry Potter is master of Grimmauld Place also." Harry says, his heart in his throat. The house knows how Master Draco is feeling. He doesn't have time to think about that right now.
Creature, that can't be right. I sold it. It's yours,
he adds quickly to Draco, who looks like he might be having some sort of out-of-body experience.
I sold it to you, and it's yours. That's right. This is a mistake or something. You bought it fair and square.
Oh, I don't know about that, Slughorn says. You see, Harry, there was another offer on the table for this house. One that was put down rather before Mr. Malfoy's, I might add. I even came to see about it, if you recall.
Harry thinks back, and does, with the murky haziness of all his memories from the years after the war, sort of recalled Slughorn coming by the Auror's office one day.
You wanted to know if it was true I was selling Grimmauld Place, Harry says slowly. You asked about the unbreakable vow.
You see, that's what really gets me about this whole situation,
Slughorn says, spreading his hands.
You were already so unconcerned about the place that you didn't want to bother with all that mess. It all could have been so easy if you had just gone to a less scrupulous solicitor to manage your affairs. I would have snapped the house up before Mr. Malfoy even knew it was for sale.
He glares at both of them, crossing his arms over his chest.
But of course, old Bracefoot's a sentimentalist and just had to hold out for someone with a blood connection who was willing to swear on their life not to harm the old place. She was mine by rights, you know. I saw her first.
Are you serious?
Draco says faintly after a moment.
This whole thing is just about you wanting to get back at me for having something you wanted.
You don't even know what you have,
Slughorn cries, throwing his hands in the air.
Children, all of you. The core of the Black House hasn't always lived here, you know. This is just a row house, a shell. That core has been carted around since the Middle Ages, from hut to hovels to houses to castles, wherever that family went, for hundreds and thousands of years.
He looks around, eyes gleaming.
This is the preservation room, you know. It always shows up in every version of the house. Malfoy Manor doesn't have one, does it, Mr. Malfoy?
No, Draco says, and for the first time since Slughorn stepped into the room, he sounds genuinely nervous.
But I've done all kinds of research. This is just, I would know if this house had a core from the Middle Ages. Oh, you know nothing, Slughorn snaps. I can tell you how painful it was sitting and listening to you and your twittering little friends yesterday, all of you barely more than Hogwarts students, talking like you knew anything at all about the history you claim to love.
What? Draco exclaims. How could you have... what?
He likes to be furniture, says Harry, fixing Slughorn with a look of deep disgust.
He was the seat in the sitting room for the last 2 days.
The green one? Draco demands. Harry, I sat on that. And it was no picnic for me either, says Slughorn, making an unhappy little face at him. But it was worth it. My mother used to say that in ancient times the Blacks were necromancers, and they'd put their dead in here for reanimation. This core once had the power to wake the dead, Mr. Malfoy, and you're wasting it running a quaint little household museum. Oh, and what would you do with it?
Draco snaps. His voice is fierce, but his hand is gripping Harry's shoulder so tightly that Harry thinks it's probably going to leave a bruise right over his fire poker scar.
Think an army of zombies is likely to win you a lot of power and influence, do you? Don't be silly,
Slughorn says smoothly, and then Harry uses the word insane a lot. Its derivatives and variations. Thinks it about Draco at least 3 times a day, about Ron and Hermione, about people he works with, the rest of his friends. He thinks it about himself, which is the crux of the whole thing, really. Harry's been afraid for his entire adult life that he's wired wrong, that he was damaged too young and too severely to ever be a whole person again. He lived with himself the year after war, when the scarring in his mind was so fresh and so intense that his magic went haywire, sometimes crashing out windows and cracking craters into the ground. He's lived with himself all of these last 7 years, watched himself standing still from a bit of a remove as his friends flitted and danced around him, building themselves, building their lives. Harry has called people mad, crazy, lunatic, maniac, has done it jokingly, has done it a lot, because the truth is that he's been afraid to his very foundation that it was what was true about himself. He's wanted with such a pathetic desperation that he couldn't admit it even in the privacy of his own mind, not to be the only one. But a look that crosses Slughorn's face now, it's true insanity, the kind of lunacy Harry last saw end in a rebound of its own curse in the middle of the great hall. It's the look of a man who cares about nothing and no one but himself, his own ends, who will hurt and kill on the theory that he deserves to, and nothing more. And for all he hates to see it in the circumstances, for all he hates to see it ever. Harry feels relief settle over his shoulders, sweet and simple, and long since coming. Harry's not crazy. Draco's not crazy either. Or, if they are, then the word means flawed and complicated and wounded and human. And if that's true, then everyone's crazy, so no one really is. Maybe Harry isn't a well-adjusted person. Maybe he has lost years to pervasive fog, thick around his head and heart, that bled away the things he felt so easily when he was young without his even noticing. So what? It doesn't mean that he's beyond repair, that he's hurting anyone, that there's anything wrong with him. It just means that this is the person he turns out to be, that's all. It just means that this is what he's got. It also means that whatever's about to come out of Slughorn's mouth is bound to be off-the-charts madness, though.
I was cheated, you know, Slughorn says. All those years spent with the guilt eating away at me, and for what? I'm sure Tom would have found out about the Horcruxes some other way, if it weren't for me. I'm sure it would still have ended the same way, but now with the hindsight of years, as I'm forced to live without the comforts of Heracles to which I grew accustomed, it haunts me the time I wasted. The things I could have done with it.
Slughorn smiles beatifically, spreading his hands.
I don't want to raise a zombie army, Mr. Malfoy. I simply want to take the core and install it in my own home, where I can take all the time I need to work out how to age myself back, say 50, 60 years. Have back what's owed to me, that's all.
Yep, Harry says, nodding grimly to himself.
There it is.
Draco shoots him a confused look, but then turns back to Slughorn.
Oh, is that all? You are mental. Grimmauld Place can't do that. Nothing can do that. I don't even know where the core is. Please, Slughorn says, laughing. You know exactly where it is, but honestly don't bother. All I really needed to do was get the house to make a call to someone other than dear Harry here. I thought waiting the customary 7 years would nullify that particular clause, but obviously I underestimated the depth of your,
he smacks a little at Harry and Draco,
passion for one another. If the new owners can't let go, the house won't either. Bloody irritating, especially when you wouldn't do me the favour of simply going mad with stress, though, as you can see, I worked it out in the end. I had to try several alternative options. What good does the call do you?
Draco's voice is higher than usual, heavy now with real panic.
Surely the house would just call Malfoy Manor, of course, or Zabini Granger, or the Parkinson Estate, even a Weasley Place. The house will call Slughorn.
Slughorn cries. Really, Harry thinks, the Slytherin's sort of dramatics theory holds some weight.
I knew what this house was years ago, Malfoy. I planned and planned to get my hands on it. I came when Walburga Black was dying, when her sons were dead or imprisoned, and it seemed that soon the house would stand alone. I befriended her. I, alone. I wrote the offer myself, and she took it and carried it with her through the halls of the house until her dying days. The house of Black, in peril, calls Slughorn.
Oh my God,
Draco says. His hands fall at last from Harry's shoulder. He looks almost as panicked as he did up in the kitchen when Harry was dying. Well, Harry probably still is dying, just a lot more slowly.
What?
He says low to Draco. He doesn't care if Slughorn hears or mocks the concern in his voice. Fuck Slughorn.
What does it matter if the house calls him? He's already here.
Harry, Draco says and swallows, if a house calls another house, if a master is in such peril that the house itself has to make the call, it's forfeit to the master of the other house. I mean, if they want to take it over, it's forfeit to them. The theory was that if a master ever got themselves in such trouble that they couldn't even send for help themselves, they weren't fit to be guardian over one of these places. "Well, it's just me that's hard," Harry cries. "You're the real master of this house anyway, and you're fine. You just don't have your wand. That can't count. The house can't just be forfeit if there's still a master who can watch over it." "Yes, Harry," Draco says, and his voice is almost kind. He smiles, small and tremulous, and utterly without any happiness at all. "But you said it yourself. He's going to kill me." Slughorn lets out a big, satisfied sigh, even as Harry looks at Draco in horror.
"You know, I do feel so much better now that it's all clear,"
he says and cracks his knuckles.
"Now, boys, this has been fun, but I really am looking forward to find that core, and Mr. Malfoy, regrettably, your time has come. Last words. Would you perhaps like a cigarette? We've got plenty of time, you see. No one else is coming."
There's a movement out of the corner of Harry's eye. Creature is waving his arms over his head. When Harry looks over at him, Creature darts a nervous glance at Slughorn to make sure he's not paying attention, and then he starts pointedly looking from Harry's eyes to Harry's pocket and back again, over and over. It reminds Harry of Draco that very first day, silently and swiftly guiding Harry's attention where it needed to go. Slowly, carefully, he reaches into his pocket. All that's in there is his wallet. He pulls it out behind the cover of his leg. Draco can see what he's doing, is looking at him quizzically even as he rambles to Slughorn about the danger of smoking in what is clearly a stalling tactic, but Slughorn can't. Harry rifles through it, curious, on the creature's sharp, nodding gaze. There's not much in it. He uses a pouch for his wizarding money, so it's just the stuff he keeps on him in case he gets stranded somewhere muggle, a couple of pounds and an ID, and a few old receipts he's never bothered to clean out, and then, in the bag, he finds it. Something he's completely forgotten ever receiving until right now. "Hey, Slughorn," Harry says, interrupting Draco's rant midstream. "What do you say those rules were? A master has to take an offer of help and, what did you say, carry it through the house with them? Get it in writing and walk the horse?"
"That's how it works, yes," Slughorn says and shakes his head. "This is a very transparent attempt to stall Harry, even for you. I'm going to kill him, no matter what, you know."
"Oh, sure," Harry says, ignoring Draco's outraged little glare at his casual tone. "Just, well, quick, before you do. Do you think this counts?" He holds up the piece of paper he found in the back of his wallet, the blue strokes of its original penmanship almost hidden beneath the way every line is glowing gold.
"Potter, you are very drunk right now, but please, when you find this, do not hesitate to call if Draco needs anything at all. And what the hell, if you do too, for an Auror and a Gryffindor, you are a laugh riot, though you really can't hold your drink, and a sincere tragedy vis-a-vis Draco's taste. It's Sabini Grange, 10 Rosethorpe Lane, Pongburn. Cheers, Blaise Sabini."
"No," Slughorn breathes. "Let me see that," Draco says, snatching the paper out of his hand, as from upstairs they hear the sound of the door crashing open.
"Harry!"
calls a voice so familiar that Harry could cry with relief. "Malfoy, what the hell are you?" "Run!" Harry calls back and then doubles over a little, because it turns out shouting heard something awful, even through the stasis charm. Draco slaps a hand over his mouth, glaring from Harry to the knife in his bag, even as he yells, "We are down here, Weasley! Move, he's wounded, we're— Oh, don't you fucking dare, you treacherous worm!" This last is directed at Slughorn, who's diving towards one of the small windows that are set into the top half of the storeroom walls. It's not necessary, though, because as Harry watches in amazement, 2 massive spike-coated green tentacles crash through the glass from the outside and wrap Slughorn in their clutches, spewing seed pods wildly. "Vicky," Harry says, shaking his head, an incredulous grin spreading over his face.
"Well, I'll be goddamned,"
Draco says, blinking at the writhing mass of a man and plant.
"She does love me."
Ron comes thundering down the stairs then, Trent, Seamus and Blaise hot on his heels. Harry's pleased to note that Trent looks only a little bit like he's about to wet himself. It's a big improvement, though his face does go slack with horror when he gets a look at Harry on the floor. Ron's face does too, though, so maybe they'll make an aura out of the kid after all.
"Merlin, Harry!"
Ron says, eyes wide, and then,
"Holy shit, is that Professor Slughorn?" "Don't ask him questions, take him to St. Mungo's," Draco snaps. "Honestly, you're all completely incompetent, except for Blaze, who apparently knew this whole time what was going on and didn't see fit to mention."
"I did not,"
Blaze says, sounding shocked. "I don't even know what's going on now. My whole bloody house went mad, and then Blinky started screaming that the call was sounding from Grimmauld Place and we must attend. The note, Blaze," Draco says.
He sounds exacerbated, but he's not looking at Blaze anymore, even though he's talking to him. He's looking at Harry, gaze steady and warm.
"That you gave Potter here. Oh, I'd guess that night you pretended to run into him at the pub."
Blaze shrugs one shoulder, still looking completely bemused.
"I was just a little afraid you might try to kill him or something, Draco. Or, I don't know, fill the whole museum with water again."
"That was one time,"
Draco says to Harry, the edges of his mouth working up.
"And I had a very good reason, you know."
And Harry laughs and leans forward and lets his head rest against Draco's shoulder. He's so tired, and it's sorted out now, isn't it? Draco's safe, and Harry can let go for a minute. Harry can let someone else figure the rest out. Slowly, Draco's finger creep into Harry's hair, stroking in little hesitant swipes at the nape of his neck. Harry closes his eyes, lets out a breath. They're fine. It's all going to be fine.
"I'm sure you did,"
he tells Draco's collarbone, and falls asleep to the faint sensation of Draco's huff of laughter hitting the side of his throat. To be continued. Thank you for listening to What We Pretend We Can't See by gyzym, read by LMX Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on Spotify, YouTube, or AO3.